Hey, gang, this is Frederick, founder and publisher of Saturday AM, and we're coming to the conclusion of SaturdayCon. And we have a few things happening right after this final panel, but I think you're going to really love this final panel. This really is just a great, great opportunity for us to do the theme of this show, which is to not just support and promote fanboys and fangirls of manga and comics and video games and anime, but to promote, to be fanboys and fangirls of the comic book, anime, manga, Webtoon business. And our next and final guest is someone who just has such a great trajectory on all these things and really looks at it, I think, in a holistic manner. His bio is fantastic. Tom Akel used to be involved with, well, originally was at MTV and then was one of the chief orchestrators of where Webtoon went as it came here into the United States. And since then has gone on to help found a new comic book entity for the ability to do subscription model stuff called Graphite, and then has moved on to his own company now that is focused on taking awesome creators like you guys and really helping you navigate these choppy waters with things like crowdfunding. So it's called Rocketship Entertainment. Tom, it is a pleasure, man, to have you here, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely, man. Thank you for accepting. I really appreciate it, dude. So now
Yeah.
you're out of Cali, right?
Yep. I'm in LA. It is not snowing here. It's
Awesome.
actually looks gorgeous out actually.
I was getting ready to say I was looking at because I'm
Yeah.
downstairs because upstairs like it's so hot up there, and I just came down here because the dog is like kind of chilling and stuff. And as I'm talking to you, I'm like looking out the window. I'm like, has it gotten any better? And I said this guy like all bundled up trying to walk is like trying to make his way through this like mound of snow with his dog. And I'm thinking, man, this is this is a really really kind of sluggish day here, but I'm good. You seem completely relaxed, so I'm like, man, he must be chilling out there in California.
Yeah, it's nice out. I mean, I miss the East Coast terribly, but yeah, it's days like this are okay, in the middle of January.
That does make it worthwhile when you're out there, no doubt about it. Well, Tom, we had a great show thus far, and I think what I'm happy about with you as our final guest is it really is we're really able to kind of take like many of the threads of the conversations we had throughout the weekend and to really kind of deposit it and put some real final perspectives on it because I think there's so much stuff that really came out regarding the state of comic books today and the state of the comic industry today. um, let's really start at the very beginning because where we're going to go with this, talk about crowdfunding, talk about NFTs and stuff.
Great.
Your beginning, I think, really helps to kind of frame that. So now I didn't know about the MTV thing until Sanford told me to me. So tell
Oh,
me more
wow.
about
Yeah.
the MTV part. Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that.
Oh, in terms of my background,
Yeah.
yeah, I was at Viacom for almost a decade. So I started at Comedy Central right out of grad school, and started the mobile media division there.
Hmm.
So that was games, apps, ringtones when those were a thing, wallpapers when people were paying for those, WAP sites, as they were called, wireless access protocol sites,
Yeah.
like before pre iPhone, all J2ME and Java, and uh, on like back when carriers controlled the pipes, right?
Right.
And not the Googles and the Apples of the world. I was there for several years. From there, really sort of um, what I was always a comic fan and into comics and messing around, in my free time on things, right? But what really sort of pushed me into the field was I transitioned from Comedy Central over to Spike TV to start or head the mobile unit there,
Hmm.
and that mobile unit was fledgling and a big pillar of the brand, which is now Paramount Network and was completely changed. But was the Scream Awards, so it was a lot of mixed martial arts, sci-fi, but comics were a big piece of it. So we started to, and at the same time, made for mobile content was exploding. Right, networks were making a lot of money in the space, so we were charged with developing original series against that. So the first original series I developed was Robert Kirkman's Battle Pope, which Robert
Oh
wrote
yeah.
and I directed.
Hmm.
Uh, we did Stanley's Ringtones, which I wrote and directed, and kind of had a bunch of different comic and comic adjacent content. So then when I went over, I was only at Spike for about just over a year, I think, and then was recruited over to MTV. At MTV, I started a platform called MTV Geek, which lasted for a few years,
Yeah.
and MTV Comics. uh, that kind of came in. I went over there to manage digital as executive producer for digital for the shows on the network. So, Jersey Shore, Teen Wolf, all that fun stuff.
Right.
Uh, and then as a part of that, spun up MTV Geek and MTV Comics. And that's when, all of my relationships from like the past several years, both the Comedy Central and Spike TV and, kind of just messing around on the side, which is how I first met like Sanford Green and a whole bunch of other creators I'm still friends with to this day,
Yeah.
kind of started to come into play. Did that for a few years before I moved to the West Coast and joined Webtoon to start the Webtoon US division.
Well, so like you said, you were into comic books, and I think what's so fascinating about that is that one of the things that we talked a little bit about yesterday is this notion that the most important thing creators can do is consistency. Is just being committed to being able to put the work out there and consistently trying to make sure that they continue to
Yeah.
build it, and over time it happens because a lot of folks, if they know who the name Robert Kirkman is, they're not going to know about Battle Pope. Only those of us who know,
Right.
that's where
Right.
he got started.
Right.
And so it's just fascinating that like so you've had a chance to see that. And that's what makes, I think, your position and your consultancy that you're able to do for some young creators so good, is that you've lived this, you've seen that ability for creators to continue to evolve and continue to grow, but at the core of what they have to do is that level of consistency. We're going to get obviously to Webtoon, but what's your thinking on that as it relates to like did you see in Kirkman at that time working on Battle Pope? Did you see like, man, this guy, he truly does have some great ideas. Like, I think this guy's going to explode in a few years.
Well, Walking Dead and Invincible were already out as comics,
Right.
and it was just when I was working with Robert. It was just before Walking Dead was picked up by AMC. So I remember talking to him about um, the bidding, I can't get into it, but the path
Uh,
for that to have happened, right?
well,
Um,
he's admitted that, and I don't know if you were there when this happened, but he's admitted this publicly. This is public knowledge that Paramount had the rights to Invincible.
yeah, oh, that was the case. I meant on the Walking Dead side, but
Okay, got it.
yeah. So, but yeah, Paramount was making they had announced the Invincible film, and Robert was writing the script, I believe, and that just never happened. I guess the rights reverted, and probably for the best, because now we have that amazing Amazon series, right?
That's good.
Then hang on one second. Harp, please shut the door. Okay, go. She's not in here. I'm on. Sorry.
That's all good, man. It's all good here, man. I got a dog in the corner, like literally, like I hear her whine. I'm like, not now, not now.
Yeah. So with Robert, you know, it, he was already successful in comics. But yeah, I mean, I think with most creators, you got to see that drive, right? And if it's not there, either the drive's there or it's not. I mean, it's one of many components. The most important of which is usually talent. But if the drive's not there, then they're not going to make it, and if they're not willing to commit, I mean, you know, so sort of not to go off on like a tangent, but one of the things I always look for, uh, when initially we were building Webtoon and getting creators to understand that this thing even exists and it's real, and no one knew what it was in 2014, 2015,
Mhm.
was I'd scout artist alleys. And that to me was, it's hard to check online, right? Everybody has like a web comic up somewhere, so you got to kind of figure out. And this was before the UGC aspect. I mean, the UGC aspect of the platform existed, but it wasn't heavily used. Uh, are they committed? Are they going to be able to crank content on a regular basis? Like, that when you're Marvel, DC, and Image, and Dark Horse, and Boom, because you're working with these creators over years, their output. So it's sort of, there's a kind of like, okay, this person's going to work. They want to get their content out. They're not going to drop off after 2 issues. They're going to work on something in between. For me, seeing artists in Artist Alley, which is a commitment, um, was always like a first real sign that someone was very serious about their craft. Like, they're spending money, they're making ash cans, or they're self-publishing through um, Lulu or whatever print on demand service they can find, and they're
Mhm.
showing up at cons and making a go of it. So it's like, at least there's like that initial sort of effort on that side.
So there's a lot there those are all things I'm going to talk to you about, and I'm glad you went there with it, because I want to explore each of those. But so I talk about this a lot. I talked about this yesterday, and again, you're, like I said, you're a really good person for this conversation, because you have such a unique perspective on this, given what you've done and what you do. I tell you what, we'll come back to the notion, but I would love to get your thoughts. We'll get to your thoughts about the notion of create. detecting talent. We do it at Saturday AM, and I've been talking about this for
Right.
years. Like you said, that element of, do they appear to be the person who really wants it? I have this line I say all the time, like, I can teach you about the business, I can teach you about the content and how to perfect content, I can teach you about data, I can teach you about all these sort of things that can help you create better stories. I can't teach you ambition.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, ambition
Yeah.
is the thing. I can't give that to you. If you don't have it, then all I'm doing is talking to you, and it's just going in one ear and out the other. And I think that, I'm curious what you think. Well, like I said, let's get through Webtoon first, but the culmination of that is this notion of, are creators today, do you think there's going to be a difference in how we detect that talent because of the fact that what you just talked about with Comic Cons and stuff? We're looking at a world where that may not be as relevant, or may not be as possible in the next year or so, or certainly in the last 2 years. That's made more
Right.
complicated. But let's talk about Webtoon real quickly, because we had Michael Son on yesterday, and Michael, like you said, a great guy, and I just so enjoyed hearing him talk about some of the things that they're doing well at Tapas, and then obviously
Yeah.
Webtoon is the 800-pound gorilla in this space. When Webtoon started, we've been around since 2013. So when Webtoon started, obviously it was a Korean play,
Mm.
and most of the content of note was Korean, and probably still is the case. But and I remember when I first saw them making an effort to change. You were there at that time, so this is where I've always believed, or always thought, that you played a big role in this, because first of all, like you said, you were at Comic Cons, and I kept thinking, what the hell are they doing at Comic Cons? Why are they at Comic Cons? They're all on the phone. Why are they at Comic Cons? And not just at
Yeah.
Comic Cons, Tom, big booths at Comic Cons,
Yep.
sponsoring parties at Comic Cons. So and at different Comic Cons too. We're not talking about, again, when kids hear this, they think Comic Con. I'm talking like Heroes Con
Yep.
down in Charlotte. So tell me when you came in, and tell me what your mandate was, and tell me what your thinking was about some of the things that you got started to get them to do, because clearly there was Webtoon before, and there's Webtoon today, and there was clearly a pivot.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it was establishing the brand in the US, right? And, there were a few pieces that went into that. One was rebranding and renaming what was called Challenge League, which was the UGC platform. Another was educating creators on what this is. Is this real? Does this make money? Is it a scam? You'd hear that a lot, right? It was discussed on panels. Like, creators would be reached out to, they'd be like, I don't know what this is. This doesn't,
Yeah.
the platform itself, the site itself, even, was run out of Korea. So, everyone's English isn't perfect, and it was evident on the site. So you're kind of looking and thinking like, okay, this is like a niche overseas, thing that maybe has some readers in the US. But in order to get creators excited about it, when you talk about the conventions, I mean, that was the plan, right? I mean, it was develop I forget, it was like a 20-page booklet that was beautifully designed. And I wrote all this content for that we'd bring to cons. And, first it was just me. And then over time, an editorial team would walk around to artist alleys and hand this out, talk to creators, sponsor artist alleys, partner with DeviantArt, try to get the brand out there in a bigger way, run contests, show people what a vertical Webtoon is, do signings with creators. And at the same time, the platform was growing and there was scale. So the creators that had followings that were coming out of the UGC section in the US, bringing those creators to cons, doing free signings, and starting to show the scale of the fandom, because it's very difficult to, now it's not, but then it was very difficult to understand
Hmm.
that for creators especially, we weren't marketing the app to the public. We weren't trying to get people to download the app, right? We were trying to get creators to understand and embrace the brand, right? And understand what it is, understand there's an opportunity here, feel like it's legitimate, and be a part of the comic community. So that was really the focus for those first few years, which is why you saw us at, Denver and Heroes Con and C2E2 and, a whole bunch of them. And then me personally, like sometimes just going by myself down to, FlameCon or MegaCon or, a dozen in a year. I mean, there was a point one year when I was at Baltimore, and I'd been traveling so much to so many cons. No joke, for about 60 seconds, I couldn't remember what state I was
Right.
in.
I
I'll
can
never
believe
forget
that.
that moment too. Yeah.
I can believe that. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know we saw you at a couple of shows. I kept thinking like, I remember just thinking of like, damn, like I have misread Webtoon because they're taking this thing seriously, like at Comic Cons. Because there was always the, I mean, and look, it wasn't just me, obviously, you know this.
All right.
There were a lot of people who were like, "What are y'all talking about? Everything is digital. What are you here talking about? Like, what are you giving people? What do you have to
Yeah.
sell?" So yeah,
Yeah, and the format was brand new to Western creators, or there was a lot of education that had to happen.
did, so out of curiosity, I mean, and obviously, I don't want to, we don't have to go anything personal, but I am curious. What was the reaction in the Korean offices at the idea of like we're gonna go to Comic Cons? Because I don't even know if that's a thing in Korea.
It's not, and it was, they knew what San Diego Comic Con was,
Sure.
I think, and New York, but they didn't, for obvious reasons. It's a much smaller country. They're at the time, Repop has since built up a huge convention there, but that didn't even exist at the time.
Mhm.
Uh, so the sort of breadth of the scale of the United States, how many conventions there are, how important that is to the community, that was all brand new.
Yeah.
So it took some education. It wasn't. Yeah, I mean, look, by the second year we were partnered with DeviantArt. We did 4 cons immediately, and then just kind of grew and grew from there. I mean, started with a couple, started with like a really small party at New York, and turned into the rooftop of, I forget, the hotel facing San Diego Comic Con,
Right.
right? So you know, it took a pretty quick turn, in just 2 to 3 years, right?
I mean, but it worked. I mean, people because like I said, there was a pivot. Like people were, and I'm not gonna say everyone fully embraced or understood Webtoon, but there was more of an acceptance of the fact that you guys were part of the conversation.
Yeah, and the other part of that too was who we were signing, right? It was
Right.
immediately doing a few deals across kind of different content types, like signing Michelle Fan, to make people understand. All right, we are going to be forward thinking in this space. I mean, she had her own comic idea, but working with someone who's a YouTube, one of the top YouTube superstars, right?
Mhm.
Same time, it's signing with Top Cow and working with Mark Silvestri and bringing Cyberforce to the platform for for an original run.
Mhm.
And then obviously with Stanley and Power Entertainment, and just kind of trying to find those places where you can bring it, and then it obviously grew to, like, the Sanford Greens and Ryan Benjamins and Colleen Doran and so on, and a whole sort of stable of established Western creators that made the, like, those Marvel and DC deals you see now. I think uh,
Right.
that was the beginning of making brands like that understand what was happening here, and just looking at it, right? Not never mind the scale or no scale, just
Right.
looking at it, right? Like just getting
Yeah.
our
No.
eyeballs on it.
Absolutely. No. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I like I said, I, I think I was telling Stu this yesterday. Like, I mean, I think we're all. I think Stu's maybe a little older than me, and we're all, I think roughly the same age. And
Yeah.
that, like, for me, like, yeah, I mean, I when I graduated from Carolina in '96, like everything that was happening, because a lot of this stuff has all happened in the past, like, 25 years. And so as you start seeing all this stuff starting to really take off, you really start to appreciate. I was appreciating it at the time, and every time I saw something, appreciating the marketing component of it, like, oh, okay, man, like that was clever how they did that. Like, that was interesting. I would have thought to have done that, and the results seem to be there. Staying on that because you touched on this, and you're a great partner, Tom. You're giving me some segues. So these are all questions I already had, Tom, but you're like bleeding into it. When you talked about Colleen Doran and some of the creators that you brought in, again, I'm curious to know kind of like what was the instinct there? Obviously, get creators that Americans recognize so that they take this platform seriously. Got it. That
Right.
helped me take it seriously, so get it. But it had a side effect, and I'm curious to know. And again, tell me as much as you want to tell me. But I'm curious to know how much of this was not embraced
Oh
inside
yeah.
of the company, and vice versa. How much of this was truly per plan on your end or your team's end? In other words, Webtoon today has one thing, and Tapas, they have one thing that makes them the envy of every other comic company out there, and that is that you guys have all really dominated the female reader space. I mean,
Right.
dominated it. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah.
And you think about it, you're like, I wouldn't have seen that coming because the comic industry, as you know, having gone on these cons in particular, is very male dominated. It's white and male dominated. And so the
Yep.
notion that you all back then, we're talking about 8, 10 years ago, thought, man, let's get some of these women in here. Let's start bringing more female talent here. Let's get their stories out there. That would have gone against every traditional comic book conventional wisdom that I'm sure you would have heard back then. So I'm curious to know: was there pushback? Was it part of the plan? How did that go?
That was the plan. Well, initially when Webtoon wanted to enter the US, it was whatever's going to work, right? Whatever's going to get scale, because the scale in Korea existed, and everyone reads Webtoon in Korea. It's not male or female, and it's a little bit of a eh, you know, it's a smaller country, so it's less cultural diversity, right, than the United States. Um, Obviously, uh, but the first time that came up was New York Comic Con. I'm looking up as I'm thinking in my first year there. So it must have been New York Comic Con in 2015. I was only there 6 months.
Okay.
So growth had been small. We made inroads, but nothing gigantic outside of presence at San Diego, and starting to work with my at least my contacts in the industry to kind of make sure people understood, like, this is a thing that's coming. And at the time, my supervisor asked, which was what's the larger comic market in the United States, men or women? And I was, well, right now it's men. Men dominate the market, and his thought was like, oh well, let's go after that. And I said, no, I think the opportunity here is, we should go after women. We have a lot of great romance content. We should focus on female creators. Obviously, this is around 2015. There was certainly kind of happening online already, and in the
Mm,
world already was a shift to
yeah.
to to the understanding that women read comics and want different types of comics and different types of stories, and that, more and more discussion around how not all comic shops, obviously, but there was an unfriendliness in comic shops traditionally, and a history of that, and making sure we open those doors. So, our first South by Southwest panel was about that, right? It was about female empowerment, female creators. It was all female panel that I moderated of our creators. We would do things like trading cards of, Webtoon's heroines trading cards, right? Uh, and really push in that direction. And part of that was also, the other part about reaching a female audience at the time was, all right, well, we're not in stores. We're not trying to get a female audience to leave their home and go into this comic shop that they may already have a negative opinion of and spend money on something. It's We're going to market to them digitally. And they're on their phones. That's where we are, right? I mean, everybody's on their phones. It's kind of
Yeah.
silly to say that, but it's much easier to reach an audience on your phone than it is physically in a store.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Sorry, the dog
no,
is
no, that's all right. Yeah,
yeah
my kid,
having a
your
great.
dog. um, so it was, and the term, my supervisor said, oh, that makes sense. It's what we call blue ocean, right? Instead of red ocean, where all the blood's in the water and everybody's going after the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it worked really quickly. The intent was always it wasn't to solely focus on the female audience. It was to start there, and then as we grow, bring in the male audience, bring in the Western audience. I think the platform and the brand is really dominated. Um,
Mhm.
Both Webtoon and Tapas, and a lot of the others that we're not mentioning, right?
Yeah.
There's Webcomics, the app, and there's Billy, which is a newer one, and all of these apps, dominate that space.
Yeah.
Uh, so right now, there's not a lot happening outside of that
Hmm.
audience. So that's where I think there's opportunity, and that's the part that'll be interesting to me in the next few years is who's gonna right now that we're most of those brands and apps are very focused, right? And when you go on social media, you can see, yeah, the easiest way to tell what a brand wants to be is what are they online, right? What are they putting out there? What's their social media presence?
Right.
Um, so now I think there's more opportunity to kind of diverge from that now that it's so big in one space, and for other brands now to understand that that exists, and capture some of that audience, right? I think the Batman Family Adventures, the Wayne Family Adventures comic on Webtoon is outstanding, and that was the smart way to attract a female audience who
That's right.
isn't currently buying, you know,
Hmm.
what are great. There are great Batman comics in stores, but they're not reading those. That some women are, but it's primarily a male audience going in there. It's probably a 40-year-old male audience going to the comic shop and buying Batman every week, right, or every month.
Right.
Um, and now you're expanding that brand. So I think like the Marvels and the DCs and other big brands are going to start to understand now how to reach more audience. And I want to see if the digital side can also figure out how to go back into the audience that's always been there.
Just to give me a second.
Sure, sure, man.
All right. That was a powerful dream that dog was having.
All good.
Thinking like, that was a powerful dream. No, I mean, 100%. And when I was talking to Michael, and actually Koo was there, and
Oh,
Beth
yeah.
on one panel, and one of the things that came up, what was that very thing you're talking about, was the notion that, once you start doing something right, it triggers, people are going to chase success.
Right.
So, when they see, oh, hey, there's a female market here. Let's make more female content. Like, to your point, the companies will pursue that, which is good. That's how representation grows. Fortunately and unfortunately. So no, I mean that's been quite exciting to see, and not just that. I mean, let's be open as well. The fact that Webtoon, also, because one of the areas where diversity is pretty strong within the Asian diaspora is, and very happy to see this is, you see a lot of LGBTQ, BL,
Yep.
you see a lot of that content as well get a lot of play, and have some really great stories written with those type of characters. So yeah, I mean, it's been good to see that. I think, you know the Lore Olympus success, I think, has really been the most eye opening. Let's just put it that way. I think that put a nail in the conversation regarding whether or not women are actively supporting this content, or were they just supporting it because it was free and online.
Right.
Uh, that we've answered that pretty succinctly. Obviously, you also, again, with Sanford Green and other creators, Ryan Benjamin, you also were happy. I'm happy to know that you were also pushing more ethnic diversity as well, which is
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
that's another area where we don't see enough content being produced in that space. We're starting to see, I think, all the companies kind of approach it a bit more. We certainly, as part of our core focus, but we're starting to see a bit more of it happening. When you see now what has happened with Webtoon, and how Tapas is growing. I mean, Tapas just got bought by
Yeah.
$500 million. I mean, so clearly, I mean, I'm like, yeah, well, whenever you guys want to talk to me about Saturday AM, we will listen. But but yeah, so what's your feel now as to where the industry's at now? Because obviously, with the pandemic, and this comes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, with the pandemic, we saw two things really happen. We saw, first of all, we saw that print is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. Now, whether or not people are buying print in stores, that's the only data that I think people gets misconstrued, because I have not seen that data that suggests that print's not dead because people are still going to stores buying it. I don't think that's the case. But print clearly is not dead. We saw record sales of print books. We saw books running out of copies available, like Chainsaw Man. But in
Yep.
this new space that we're in right now with the pandemic, do you think that there's further innovation to come as it relates to digital focused comics, or the subscription model kind of like
Yeah.
the big thing right now, or is it going to all be the kind of vertical scroll comics, and those will just be really where it
Um,
all is?
I think. All right. So I think there's a lot of space for innovation. There's a lot of room for innovation still. A lot. Uh, you know, the current market, the current apps, they're going to evolve. There's going to be certainly probably new players in the this year, next year. It's going to happen, right? More and more. So I think we're going to see competitors enter the market with new ideas. Now, whether they have the right ideas, whether those ideas are going to stick, that's going to happen. I also think the explosive growth of Kickstarter is going to contribute to that, right?
Mm,
And the industry was already going this way in a lot of ways, right? Like creator owned, kind of you can do it yourself. So now it's we saw Zoop launch last year. We'll see how that grows. That's the first real competitor for Kickstarter in how many years, right? I mean, it's been Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and nothing else for
that's
forever.
right. Hmm.
Um, so I think we'll start to see more and more apps and platforms like those that focus on creator owned
Hmm.
start to take off. I think we're going to start to see brands try to figure out what their brand looks like in this world, right? They already have been. They've already been having those conversations. And once Webtoon and Tapas took off, Comixology was always there. And really was first. Like Comixology is the the godfather of all this, really,
Oh,
right? Like,
completely agree. Yeah, completely
yeah,
agree. That they have not grown to be the most powerful. That has been quite telling, I think, and that's no disrespect to
uh,
Comixology, but that is very telling that they were the first out. But like you said, Webtoon and Tapas have, and other companies have
yeah.
clearly been the
Well,
explosive growth.
in readership, but not necessarily in revenue. So Comixology doesn't release their revenue numbers, but the thing from the numbers I hear,
Mhm.
Comixology's revenue is no joke. So they're you know so Comixology still is one of the top players in the space, if not even possibly still number one. They're just not in terms of free online readership. Which it's not apples and apples. Everything on Comixology is behind a paywall.
That's right.
You know,
Mhm.
almost nothing on Webtoon is behind a paywall, right? Except for
Right.
fast pass titles, right? So it's a different beast, and they are different markets, right? Comixology is more of a not to go down this hole. Everybody knows this. Comixology is more of a representation of your comic shop.
Mhm.
Webtoon and Fabus are completely different, right?
Mhm.
And they're new fields. One of the other things I think is going to the one piece that I think is the most challenging in terms of now that the Webtoon format, Webtoon the now, not Webtoon the brand, right? Now that the Webtoon format has become com- has I think at least 99% awareness amongst the creator community, if not 100%, right?
Mhm.
Where just 4 or 5 years ago, aside from something like Scott McCloud talking about infinite canvas and some ideas like that, it
Mhm.
really wasn't out there in a way that people thought about it, and certainly no one was developing against it.
Right.
Now, one of the things that that we do at Rocketship is take vertical comics, and reformat them for print. Um, that is not a fun process.
Yes.
So, we do a very good job of it. Some of the creators do it themselves. They do a great job of it, especially with their own content. But it's painstaking design work.
Yes.
And a lot of times the artists working in digital are native to digital, so they're
Mhm.
not really even thinking about how many inches wide their canvas is,
Right.
EPI, are they handling their lettering properly? They're just in Clip Studio making something,
That's right.
and then
Right.
they're sticking on the internet. And
That's
then, sometimes I'm dealing with, you know, 70 gigs of Clip Studio Clip Studio files, and we're reverse engineering them into Photoshop and then into back into layers and then pulling out the lettering and getting them print ready.
mhm.
Um, and that's no joke.
Is
So I
is
think
is
one of
not
the
right.
Right. So one of the things I think we'll start to see on the creator side, and maybe we'll see it on the platform side, is some sort of progression towards like understanding uh, that there's an audience. That's the first. That was like what Rocketship was founded on, right? Like the idea that like there's a massive audience for this content. At the time, indie publishers weren't taking it seriously. Comic shops weren't taking it seriously. They're like, there's no audience for this, and it was like, okay, well, you know what? What if I publish Let's Play?
Right.
She's got at the time had 3 million subscribers, Leanne Kressick, and you know, it's one at the time was one of the top 20 Kickstarters of all time in comics, right? I was like,
Mhm.
okay, obviously there's an audience here for this. I mean, not to sound any kind of like I knew that because I worked with I worked with
Oh
Leanne, right?
yeah.
And I knew the platform,
Yeah.
so it was sort of like, okay, we're just going to prove it
Mhm.
um, by founding this company, and now you know 2 3 years later, we've put out 20 something books, and other companies have, Dark Horse has put out Space Boy, and we just put out Red Hook, and
Mhm.
Del Rey has put out Del Rey puts out War Olympus, and somebody put out Hooky.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of companies putting out all these titles.
Mhm.
Magical Boys coming out from Scholastic from Tapas, which is
Mhm.
obvious that's going to be a big hit. Clearly, um, everybody now knows like, okay, there needs to be some sort of way for this and this to work together
Yeah.
a little bit better than it is now. So whether that's just developing templates for creators to work with, which I've done a bit of that work to try and figure out which way is the better way to engineer your stories. I certainly have best practices
Mhm.
that I work with creators on, but I'm happy to share those too. But
Mhm.
it's is there going to be some sort of push forward in understanding like how digital and print work together? Because now everyone was like print, print, print. There was like digital, digital, digital. The in Korea, one of the reasons Webtoon took off in Korea was because the print industry was dead in Korea. The print
That's
industry
right.
was not dead in the U.S.
Right.
So that's a very different place
Yeah.
for an app to break in. Uh, Now we know all of this has happened. Like all formats, all media, right? They all work. So what is that? How do we evolve how content is developed and delivered? In 2020, is it going to happen in 2022? I think we'll see strides. I think it's probably more of a 2023 thing.
Right.
Um, but we'll start to see a change in the industry now that everyone sort of has their head around. Oh wow, yeah, these these digital titles are valuable across all media, not just as a vertical style comic book, right?
So let me ask some quick questions here. We're gonna get some questions from the audience as well. Let me ask some quick questions to
Sure.
kind of get get your perspective on some of these things. So NFTs, future, difficult right now. What do you see NFTs and how does that affect the average up and coming creator?
Jimmy Palmiotti had a great tweet yesterday about that in regards to the Mike Zeck's Spider-Man page that went for $3 million at
Oh,
Christie's or
yeah,
Heritage Auctions or something, right?
didn't see that.
Uh,
Damn. Yeah.
yeah, it was the first appearance of the black costume, right?
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
first, or the page from Secret Wars, I believe, where he's wearing it for the first time. I think the first appearance was the comic cover that came out earlier, um, which I probably have somewhere back in New York in my mother's basement somewhere. Um, but a lot of the conversation around art and comics right now in regards to NFTs is residuals and the artists not getting shut out down the road. I'm very much a proponent of that. I think like
Mhm.
if a comic page sells for millions of dollars than an artist originally did, yeah, sure. They did a work for hire. Sure, they sold a piece of art and they sold it for $300. There needs to be some sort of chain of custody that they can participate in that. Artists have a hard enough time as it is.
Mhm.
So when something explodes like that, there should be some sort of a kickback. And doing it retroactively is difficult, but I think that part of the future is like figuring out like how that happens. One of the nice, so there's a lot of pro and NFT conversations happening, right?
Mhm.
I think anybody who's anti NFT should at least take a very close look at the difference between proof of work, proof of stake, right? Take a look at which sort of cryptocurrencies are, uh, carbon neutral or carbon negative. Some claim to be carbon negative, even, right?
Sure.
Um, I think there's a future there. I don't know exactly what it is right now. It's selling art, but one of the great things about NFTs, the artist gets baked into the smart contract, and
Mhm.
they get residuals on the resale of that piece of art for the rest of their lives.
That's
Like
right.
it never stops. And
That's right.
that's awesome. And it's a decent percentage, usually like 5, 6, 7%. Like that's a nice cut of something, especially as it's sold and resold and resold and resold. And if it goes up in value. So that's a
So
really great opportunity for artists
yeah.
that, and I take climate change deadly seriously.
Yeah.
I'm
I,
you know,
I, I I'm a super
it's
liberal.
super real. Yeah, yeah, it's super
Yeah.
real.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not but I think we need to figure out what NFTs are, right? You can't just
You can't just
throw it out the window,
crap
right?
on
And
it.
say like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. Beth Kawasaki brought up the other day, and we were in the midst of several things that we had to finish the call because we had already exceeded our time. But I kept on telling her, I was like, "Well, see, that's a larger conversation." But the part that preceded it that made me go, "Yeah, this is the sort of thing I think young people really got to start considering." First of all, what you just said, love what you just said, specifically the part about, hey, you know, I don't know yet, right? Like, I mean, all the all the all the logical elements of it for those people who actually pay attention and learn about what NFTs are is the future. Sanford and I were talking
Right.
about this. It's the future, regardless of what you think about it. It is the future. You just indicated that so many people that you deal with, we have the same issue, Tom, are working on Clip Studio Paint. When you're trying to produce a physical product, that lettering, especially if it's going to be converted into other languages, has to be live
Oh,
text InDesign. So that, I mean, so right, right.
I'm doing one now that we have to localize the Spanish that was done in Clip Studio Paint, and it's a lot of work.
It's a
Uh,
lot of work, and
it's
and
a
and,
lot of
and
work.
don't know any better. And then again, and they're working digitally natively. So that you mentioned Jim Palmiotti. The best comment I saw about it was Mike Diodato. He had a great line. He's like, "Look, I sell my original art at conventions as a means to supplement my income, to pay for my health care. And when you have a pandemic that prevents me from doing that, and you know, and he's like, and by the way, I've started working digitally now, so I don't even have that original art to show off anymore. So when you give me a way that I can generate revenue like I used to, like the entire industry used to do when they worked only in on Bristol board. Well,
Yep.
then, yeah, like you know, I've got bills to pay. Like this is you know, and I'm able to track the sale of each item over wherever the person is because it's all blockchain technology. So again, it's the future. No, I don't know. I'm not a scientist on. I can't speak about it to any degree. And yes, I'm very much concerned with climate. I'm a liberal. I've built a progressive company, but I agree with you. I think this is one of those things where if you truly care about creators, that's something you got to start looking at and thinking about at some point. If you are a
Yeah.
fan or if you're a company, you got to start thinking about NFTs and how that can impact the health of your creative groups. Let
Yeah.
me ask about Substacks.
Yeah.
So that's another direction that the industry seems to have at least started to look at. Basically, taking the Patreon model, just shifting it slightly and saying, hey, we're going to just really recognize great creators. We're going to incentivize them up front so they can build their own newsletter on our platform. Their newsletters can take the form of obviously written journalistic academic approaches or just comic books. Signed a
Right.
lot of big creators, made a lot of noise. I don't know if I don't know if a lot of people who are using it, but still, what's your read on that?
Yeah. So I guess the one thing is I don't really know anyone who is subscribing right now.
Right.
I know that the money's good. I know that the deals for creators are fantastic. They're more than fair. So I think from the creator's perspective, Substack is a gift. It's jumping on something. It's probably the most lenient contract by a mile of any digital platform. You
Mhm,
retain your rights. Nothing's holding you back at all. Like it's super light and it's great money.
mhm.
Um, and so in that regard, it's great. In terms of the broad comic community, the aspiring comic creators, it's not real for them, right? Like you
Right.
need to plug into something larger. I think
Mhm,
like Webtoon, Tapas, Webcomics, you know,
mhm,
Billy, whatever it is, right?
mhm.
Um, because you don't have that audience yet. Once you have that audience and they're your audience, something like Substack works, right? Because you've
Right.
built up. Well, if you just have a couple of thousand people paying you, well, hey, that's a lot of money, and you control your own destiny
Yeah.
and no one's telling you what to do or what you can and can't do with your book. That's the best place to be in, right? Is like, you don't want anybody to have to, you don't want anyone's permission. You don't want to
Mhm,
sign crazy contracts, right? Like you want to be in control of your destiny as a creator. And that's one of the things that Substack offers. As far as they've gotten big names, so I imagine those names have enough of a following of their own, to be able to make it viable. But it is a newsletter; it's not a platform. I don't know that I've seen any marketing from Substack, so I don't know
I
if
haven't seen any. That's what I was getting ready to ask you. I've not
yeah,
seen what the only thing I've seen has been press releases.
right.
I've
So,
yet to see
is an
marketing.
interviews or yeah. So are they gonna go out there and try to be a thing, or is it sort of on the creator to draw their own audience? It's almost like it's not dissimilar from image, right? Like if you are a big enough
Right.
name, if you are a respected enough creator, if you have an Eisner in your pocket, you can go publish an image. Not
Right.
everybody gets to publish an image.
That's right.
They have an editorial team and they edit what they feel is the best of the best to publish, right?
Right.
And they only have output for X number of titles a year or a month.
Mhm.
And Substack is very similar in that regard, right? They're only going to be able to take top tier creators who have a following because it needs to work for Substack as well. I believe it's an advance and eventually there's a revenue share, right? If the advance is recoupable against the revenue
Is
from
it?
the
Yeah.
subscription,
Yeah. It goes
something like
against.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
they're not.
pay up front. It's like a music
Yeah,
contract. I mean, you
right.
can't. It's like a music
Yeah,
contract. Get the
but yeah,
upfront.
it's not a charity, right? Like they're in this to make money. Like they're
That's right.
doing this because they think it's a good idea, not just
That's
for
right.
fun.
That's
So,
right.
at some point, the subscription is supposed to drive revenue back to them. So they have to be particular about who they think can do that as well. Anyway, so, that's kind of like where I think Substack is. I don't know if it's going to shift and change at all, but I think
I'll say.
there's a place for it for sure.
I'll
It's
definitely play. I'll say this. I think I think everything you just said. They haven't done any marketing, which is always kind of like my hmm.
mhm,
Um, but it's all been PR driven. That said, though, Tom, the strategy is what you guys did at Webtoon. I mean, let's be real. Like they went after top creators. sign them to the contract, and now the hope, right, is they're going to
Yeah.
get other creators. They're going to get those creators that you and I both know that that will do the webtoon, that will do the Facebook, that will do the Twitter, that will basically generate micro opportunities for them to grow. But at the same time, like they're not going to. None of those folks are necessarily going to have the opportunities that the big creators have. They're chasing the dream,
Right.
and that just happens to help build their community. And then hopefully there'll be a
Yeah.
discovery or two that just ends up being a homegrown talent. And then at that point, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy if they can get to that point. We'll see. I will say that the image thing that you mentioned, though, I mean, obviously Saturday AM is a little different, and so our whole view of things is that to me, it's always about brand. Bottom line is about brand. The kids want to be where the brand is. Like if they've dreamed about being, if the kid, everything we've talked about today,
Yeah.
the kid who loves Shonen Jump would give a damn about what everything you and I said. They're like, look, my dream is to be part of Shonen Jump. I don't care what they offer me.
Right.
I want to have a Shonen Jump
Yeah. Yeah.
logo be on the cover, and
Oh,
that we've always run our business from that standpoint. Like what we do is what we do, but that freedom for the independent creator, especially the established creator that these other places offer, is interesting, and we'll see what it can do.
yeah.
Let's talk about Rocketship real quickly, and let's get some of these
Sure.
questions. You started your
Yeah.
company. You are working with independent creators. 'Cause I think we kind of maybe hit on that really quickly.
Yeah.
So I want to unpack that a bit. You are working like when the art when you do you approach the artists? They approach you,
Both.
and you're helping them with Kickstarters in particular, and then helping them from there. Or walk us through kind of what Rocketship does.
So we're a publisher. Our publishing agreements are standard publishing agreements.
Hmm.
We do focus on crowdfunding first, and part of that was initially a lot of creators we work with have online followings, have web followings for their web comics. So instead of trying to get the book into print and get it distributed, get it into a shop, or even post it on Amazon and get the public to go buy it,
Hmm.
the easiest sort of one-to-one connection for a fan to the creator was Kickstarter and crowdfunding. That makes them a part of the process, and it allows us to offer limited amounts of exclusive content, whether it's prints or enamel pin sets or stickers or t-shirts or all those kinds of good things, which help everyone and help the print run because a lot of those items are, frankly, they're high margin. Some of them, not all of the t-shirts are not high margin, but prints are high margin, right? There's
Right.
real work that goes into that, but there's a lot of high margin items that help the print run, help us get success off of Kickstarter, help the print run, and help all the downstream success that we've had, which got us to a point where we're distributed by Simon and Schuster now. So the books are starting to roll out. We're distributed by Simon and Schuster worldwide, and we're with Jabberwocky for as our international agent. So books will start to hit other languages as well.
Awesome.
We've done about 20 consecutive Kickstarters in a row, and I think God, we have probably 25 planned for this year across a couple of different verticals and areas, including our partnership with Legendary Entertainment for Legendary Comics, a kids line, and we're moving into tabletop gaming. Our first tabletop game will be Brothers Bond by Ryan Benjamin and Kevin Grievous's comic, and then our second tabletop game we announced right before Emerald City Comic Con is Stanley's Genesis. So it's the first Stanley branded tabletop game, and
Awesome.
those will come out. We're targeting Brothers Bond for late March, I think, and the Stanley game for this summer. But it's always a little bit of everything's a moving target these days with the
Yeah.
pandemic and production. Books, game, everything's produced in China, right? So getting products into the pipeline and getting them on a schedule, getting them on a boat, getting them on a container, the whole thing's been a little bit of a rocky road for the last 24 months. But yeah, I mean
Yep.
that's what we do. So for creators, the books we publish are creator owned.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's a very fair deal. We handle the formatting for them. We don't take any percentage ownership of the underlying IP. Their work is their work, and we put these books out in print. A lot of times we don't put them out in digital because those digital rights are spoken for by a platform. Sometimes if there's an opportunity to, we try to do it. Like with Born Sexy Tomorrow, the BL title, we kickstarted by BVBG. It's a Tapas title. You know, Michael Son said, okay, you put out the ebook, right? So we'll put out the ebook when the time comes. So some titles will be available in digital, some aren't, and then we do original titles as well. And then in terms of you know how we work with creator, like who we work with, it's partially reaching out to the network of creators I've worked with in the past, as well as people starting to kind of see what we're doing and come in and ask questions. And if there's a fit, there's a fit. Um, uh, and right now we have a submissions portal on the website. I should mention that. So if anybody does want to submit traditional books or web comics, we get a lot of submissions. So it's one of those things where it's like, if we don't reply, sorry, it probably means
Yeah.
we're not interested. It also means you may not hear from us for a little while because there's a lot of work happening right now. Um, but if somebody has an existing web comic that has substantial readership that they have the print rights to, we want to hear from them for sure.
So and so we will cut these up, everybody. Just so you feel you who are watching this live stream know, we will be cutting these videos up into smaller videos. And so when we do that, we'll make sure we have all the right information for each of the panelists, like Tom, so that you can have the information right in front of you. But what's the web address so they can find it?
Oh, rocketshipent.com as an entertainment.
Yeah. So www.rocketshipent.com, folks. You want to check out the cool stuff they're doing. And Tom, you got a juggernaut title, which was Let's Play, right?
Yeah. Let's Play is we just finished the third Kickstarter. That finished around top 30 all time in the Kickstarter category. The first one is still top 25, or the second one's top 25. When each one went up, they were probably top 20, top 25 all time. I mean, Let's Play is a massive hit. It's been optioned.
Yeah.
That announcement went out in the Hollywood Reporter, I think, last year, or Forbes last year. Yeah, I mean, Leanne's a brilliant creator. The title's fantastic.
Do, do,
It's not successful for a reason, right?
have we seen take out the webtoon anime stuff and the webtoon stuff that's in Korea? Have we seen a Western produced vertical scroll title yet that's been in multimedia yet? I know
How do
about
you
a
mean?
deal that's struck, but have we seen one yet? I don't think we've seen it yet.
What do you mean? Have you
Yes,
seen a
have
Western?
we seen an adaptation, a Western adaptation of
Oh,
a
no, no, no,
scroll
not yet,
title yet? I don't
not
think
yet.
because I know
No, the
Lord Liv,
only
but I don't think anything's happened with any of these titles yet, right?
Now, Lore Olympus was optioned by Henson. I mean, I have no insight into that. That happened after I left the company. So,
Yeah.
but I'd say like I do know that option was like a solid 2+ years ago. Options tend to be for 18 months with a second window. So I imagine they're in their second window if it's still happening, if it's renewed. It's been
Yeah.
pretty silent. Let's Play is optioned by All Nighter. Like I said, that was announced. As far as I know, I mean, nothing's been made.
Yeah.
I think a couple other things may have been optioned. But yeah, no, nothing's been picked up by um, a studio or a streamer or anything yet.
Yeah, no, that's been put in production yet. It'll be
Yeah,
very exciting to see when we finally do get to that point. We start to see some of these hit, Western produced content pieces to see, it'll be just like the Laura Olympus graphic novel. Will be yet another chance for us to prove the power of this new independent creator digital distribution culture that we're in with these young people, with
yeah.
these young talents.
Well, then I'd say like the only content that we did do was I did the development deals for the Tower of God and Noblesse anime series that ran at Crunchyroll
Yeah.
when I was at Webtoon. So those got made in English, right? Those were made with the U.S. division of Crunchyroll as Crunchyroll originals. So those deals with Seiwon Song and Brian Coluccio back when they were there. Um,
Okay.
but those are Korean titles.
Yeah.
The American titles have not happened yet. But I think it's a matter of time before something on. I mean, there's so much at this point.
That's
It's not just Webtoon and Tapas. Like I said, there's like 20 of these companies at this point. There's
no,
so
no.
much stuff. Something's going to happen.
I totally agree. I'm with you,
Yeah,
but not to mention, let's also remember, I mean, we just had a pandemic that's happening. So, like,
right.
there's, we're talking a massive amount of content. We're talking a war going on between streaming companies, and we're talking about, a deadly pandemic that's hampered
Yeah,
productions around the world. So, but no, I'm with you. It's gonna be very exciting to see when it happens. We got some questions. I think we might be able to get to most of them. So, I
sure.
do want to touch the very first one that literally picks up from this question. I'm going to publish it on the screen here so you can see it. You see
Mm,
this?
I see. The
Yeah.
How do you think oversaturation on social media affects indie comics?
And I think this picks up
Uh,
perfectly from where you just left off because, like you just said, there's so much content out there. So what do you think of that? Are
um,
saturation?
I'm not sure uh, what that person meant by oversaturation on social media affects the indie creator, unless it just means their ability to break through on social media.
I think so. I think
I think
so.
social media. I don't look at social media as a way to break through. I look at social media as something, as sort of cost of doing business, something you have to do. You should
Mhm.
obviously make efforts to build your audience there, but you should focus on your content, and your content will build your audience for you, right? So if you're putting out a good book, you're putting out content regularly. I don't think it matters that there's a lot happening on social media. I think the people who like your book will start to build that audience. That's kind of the best answer I can give to that.
That's a
I saw
great
another
answer.
question behind that.
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah. What is one of your more memorable experiences at a con for promoting?
Oh, God. I mean, I think to me the most memorable. All right, this is actually pretty easy. Is both for Webtoon and for Graphite, and starting to do it for Rocketship, and did it in the past for, I believe I did for MTV Comics, is doing portfolio reviews and getting to meet creators one on one.
Mm,
That's the best experience I have at conventions,
mm,
outside of seeing my friends who I only see at cons certain times of the year. But I love that. I love seeing creators who want to try to break through, who are showing art and making strides, giving them advice. It's much like when I was teaching. Uh, I that for me, that's just really fulfilling to see that work one on one with a creator. And then in a lot of cases, wind up working with people for years and years and years. I mean, it's how I met Victoria Roboto, who's blessed. It's how I met Tiffany Woodall, who does Lake Bloomer. Um, it's awesome to find, and even for the one, even creators who are very young, looking for a college or in college, looking for advice. It's just that's the best part of a con for me.
I totally agree, man. I completely agree. Next question is, what do you think would be the biggest hurdles for any rising new brands or apps in this space?
Oh, the first is money.
Yes,
I mean that's real.
that is.
A lot of credit to Chang Kim and Michael Sun. Building tablets from the ground up. Webtoon came in as a part of a tech giant, so we were dealing with seven-figure budgets without having any revenue responsibility for years. It's a lot easier to to do the kinds of things we were doing when money's no object, right?
Right.
But I think right now you want to break in, you're competing financially against at least a few juggernauts where it's obvious, and there are juggernauts from China that are in the space that it's not obvious. But I mean, I think it's when you start to look at like app installs on Webcomics or some of these, or Billy, and you see the explosive growth some of these platforms have, that
Yeah.
this doesn't happen randomly, right? There's investment there. I think that's the first problem. I think the first hurdle. The second hurdle is your engineering team. These apps live and
Interesting.
die by that. And if that team is not solid, so you need the money to build the market, to build both marketing and some sort of a revenue model for creators. That's not free. And the second piece is, you really need rock star engineers if you want to do this. I mean, anybody can grab a WordPress plugin and put it up and try and be like, I'm the next thing. But maybe if you have enough money and you don't have great engineers, but the thing functions, sure. But I think if you really want to have something solid, and be innovative in the space, and just there's a lot of apps that already exist right now. So
Mm.
that first wave is out. If you want to break in, you need both of those things. And engineers go back to the first point, which engineers cost money. So
It costs a lot of money, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
What was that? Well, in fact, we interviewed him today, but I was talking to, we did our characters appeared in a video game, and we were talking. Me and the owner of the company, we were talking, just talking about just the landscape. They're an small indie outfit, and obviously Saturday M is an indie outfit, and we were comparing just the apps and things that you can do with the apps and stuff. And he was talking about how that for a lot of these companies, there's you're talking, and I'm sure you saw this as well, but most of these big apps that you guys see out there, what they're dropping per day on app advertising, just per day on acquisition,
Yeah.
is insane. I mean, you're talking like 1,000 to 5 grand a day just to make sure
Oh,
they're
it's
constantly growing.
it's more than that. I'd say it's probably five figures a day. But yeah,
Oh wow, Jesus. So 10 grand a day. So yeah, I mean it's amazing stuff. And so you're looking at as Tom said, I mean the money that is required for this. Of course, folks, we're doing it by brand, but the money is
yeah.
definitely the thing. Let's see here. This is a good question for someone on YouTube. Do you have to read all the content you promote regularly, or just enough for a basic understanding of the stories?
Um, Me personally, well, all right. So me and my capacity at Rocketship, I read all the books we publish. It's not that many books. When I was head of content at Webtoon, that was impossible. I mean, it's 100 something titles, each one of them the length of a full issue of a comic book every week, not just every month. I mean, there's just too much. So no, an editor who's assigned to that title needs to read it. And the titles that I worked, that I was hands on with, yeah, obviously I read them. I mean, like Sanford's book, I'm pointing to. I'm only mentioning because you had him on yesterday, but yeah, I mean, I know every word of that book of 1,000. So yeah, I mean, if you're working on it, it's all about scale, right? So it just depends on if you grow too much. Not one person's going to be able to read it all, but and it depends on if you're publishing or for UGC. If UGC, no, you're not reading everything, right? That's just physically impossible, but also not necessary.
Yeah.
For the stuff you publish, you got to understand what it is, right? And if you're going to market it, you really got to understand what it is. Now, maybe you don't have to read all
But
150 chapters or
if you got to
something, but you
publish
got
it,
to read a bunch. Yeah, you got to read it. You got to know what it is, right? Like,
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I can tell you guys right now, no, I don't read all of it. And we have editors. You guys saw Austin last episode. I mean, last panel. But no, it's hard. Everything Tom said, it's hard, man. But my rule is real simple. Like nothing gets published by us that I haven't authorized. I mean, so we're not going to look at a content that I think is a silly idea or idea that seems derivative or idea that seems very similar to another idea. We're just not going to do that. So I have to feel comfortable with everything we publish. But the notion that I can read every single thing is just really, really difficult. And but we've got a great team that tries to read every single chapter, every single piece of content that's out there. The other part of reading everything as well, which is we do try to do this part, is trying to check to make sure you catch spelling and grammar errors. So sometimes when you're
yeah,
doing, you might not even read the story. You're literally zeroing in on what it says to make sure that nothing crazy is there will take someone out of the story that is reading the story because you misspelled the word but. So
yeah.
yeah. So this is the last question here, and I think it's a good one to go out on. What's the biggest challenge for bringing webcomics to print? You've touched on it, but obviously you can just kind of recap it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few challenges. I don't know which so the biggest challenge varies from book to book. Okay. So first is the format itself and breaking down the cadence of all right, so let's talk about just the Webtoon Tapas webcomics apps of the world, not people already putting a page a day up on maybe Hiveworks or what do they call the ring? Hey, what are those the rings of like webcomic sites, where it's just
Yeah.
they all have the same player. I'm
Uh,
blanking on the name, but
yeah.
so focusing on the vertical ones that release, it's not just that they're vertical; it's that the cadence of those, and from a storytelling perspective, is on a weekly basis. So it's more akin to a television series that you're watching every week than it is to a comic. So there's no page turns; every panel's a reveal. Time is actually an element of developing a story in that format. Um, all of that needs to be broken down and translated into print. It's not super, super hard, but real thought has to be put into that. Like when you have a page turn and reveal, where's a splash page? Where's an establishing shot? Where's a scene start? Because you can leave I'm doing this now because back channel, the one I wrote, we're formatted for print right now. And, there's an issue I just realized on one of them. It's like, oh, we're at we're at the house with this character. The next day we're at the police station with this character, and that was from one week to the next week, just like you come in and out of a television show that way. But in print, you can't just turn the page and the guy's teleported to a new location, right? So now, oh, there needs to be new art put in here, and the caption has to be added, and all that kind of context has to be added. So that's one of the big challenges. The other is technical. So I'd say it's storytelling or technical depending on the book. From a technical perspective, a lot of it is artists sort of cut corners when you're churning out 60, 70 panels a week,
No question.
when you're working in digital and you're getting on a platform, when that gets put over to print, there might be detail missing in the shot. You have to
Yeah.
move some things around. Lettering is larger on a phone. It needs to be shrunk down for print.
Hmm.
Um, Tails need to be moved around. So if your lettering's not done properly in Illustrator and layered and you're not addressing your Bezier curves the right way, I'm sorry if any of this is over people's heads, but all of that has to be handled right. So the more professionally produced it is from the beginning, the better. But the big challenge is a lot of it it is professionally produced from an artistic talent perspective, but not from a technical perspective. So sometimes, I mean, we deal with titles that are sometimes put up at 300 DPI, and it's like, "Whoa, these 6 chapters were done at screen res," and you're like, "Oh,
Right.
okay. How are we going to fix that?" So is it a redraw, or is it, we worked with some plugins that we've been able to stretch a book and upres it, and it's come out. Foxfires, which is up here behind me somewhere, was one of those, and it came out beautifully, because the width the artist was working at wasn't wide enough even to do it at our standard size, which is only a 5 by 7 by 8.2 book, which is smaller than a regular graphic novel. But yeah, I mean, those are the two challenges. I mean, working from vertical and chopping those things. I mean, the other part is you're moving sometimes characters over backgrounds, and if the art's flattened and not layered, sometimes there's those kinds of things to work with. Uh, and then the lettering's a big one. So
I was just say that
yeah,
lettering is the killer. That lettering is,
yeah,
if you have any ambition to get your work, folks, seen globally by, so it's got to be translated. The lettering is that, because it's just most of our creators, and we have, our company's built off a bunch of creators where English is their second language. So I mean, it's a reality
yeah,
for us regardless. But the fact of the matter is that part, when you're talking production, post production, is, to me, is the most crucial thing. I will
yeah,
say, to all the things that Tom mentioned, the mantra that I've used internally, because we've had all the books, we got 10 books coming out this year, and what we've told all of our creators is we've looked to refine their stories and make sure everything is right. Is that, there's just a different mentality, or at least I want to see there be a different mentality amongst our creators, because you have to have the mentality of, if the work is for free that they can read on the internet, then there's a certain acceptance. When
yeah.
someone's being asked to pay 10, 12, $13, there is no acceptance.
Right,
It's the, have you earned someone's dollar? And that's a fundamentally different scenario for creators than creating online content, in my opinion. And so I think those two things, as Tom indicated, I think those two things, the lettering, but then just the professionalism of the content, and making sure that it reads like a work that's valued at a financial
right,
rate. I think
right.
those are
That
two.
that's Yeah, it's got to be buttoned up. Like a lot of spelling errors slip through the cracks in digital comics. A lot of grammar errors slip through the cracks in digital comics. There's a lot of things that just kind of, you know, it's tough to keep up with. I mean, ideally, you have an editorial team who's good and is looking at those things and fixing them, but that doesn't always happen, right? So, especially when creators are, you know, working ungodly hours, and the expectations of them are very, very high and unhealthy sometimes, even. That they're just trying to get the thing out the door, even that day. So it's tough to keep up with it. So yeah, when you bring it to print, totally quality control is a big issue.
Yeah, that's the term, quality control. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Tom, that's it for us, man. And I just want everyone again to know, Tom, first of all, you guys can see in this conversation, Tom's a cool guy. I only met Tom recently. I don't have a long history with him, but I was always just really, I know Sanford loves Tom, and then I was always just really happy when I spoke to Tom, because he just, as you can see, just has a very natural flair that's combined with this incredible experience in this changing landscape of comics. I think Tom and I both can say, and Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm about to say here, but I think we can both say that comics right now is really exciting, and there's so much
yeah,
opportunity for independent creators. And so, if you're at all thinking about doing this stuff, then we highly recommend that you jump into this space, give it a chance, plug into it, and really try to give it your all. Consistency is king, and again, if you want to have, if you can produce an audience, or if you just even want to have it, try your hand at working with Rocketship Entertainment, highly recommend you check that. Obviously, we always want to look down on our end too. Don't get it twisted, but Rocket Ship and Tom, obviously, you certainly can't do wrong with that. And that would be at www.rocketshipent.com. Tom, you got any final words, man?
yeah. No, just to echo that, I think, yeah, I'd say there's more, because I see these conversations even on professional creators Facebook threads, and who have open, who don't have private, so people jump into the threads, right? It's sort of, there's more opportunity than there ever has been in comics now. Like, it's never been the way it is now. I'd say aside from the hustle is real, be prepared for that.
Yes.
And the other thing I'll say too is, I think this is an important bit of advice. is for new creators, the first time you sign a contract, always have a manager or an attorney. I see too much
Ah,
of
yeah.
that happening without that. There's plenty of great resources out there. There's plenty of good attorneys out there. Do your research, find one. There's attorneys willing to work at very reasonable rates. Even there's at least some books on the subject. Jamal Hennessy has a great book about who's an attorney for comics, has a great book about the ins and outs of legal contracts for comic creators. It doesn't mean be difficult in your first deal. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want, but it does mean have somebody looking at it to make sure it makes sense and that there's nothing in there that can damage you down the road or blindside you. So that's the one piece of advice. Whenever I'm talking to a potential comic audience, I want to make sure that they have that top of mind, like because they'll regret it later on if they don't.
Folks, this is why you want to talk to this man. So really good advice. Really good advice. Hey, dude, Tom, thank you so much for doing this, man. I'm like I said, this whole week has been awesome with so many people who just took time out of schedule to come do this. But I really appreciate you coming as well, man. This is a great way to finish off this whole show.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. You and I definitely have to hang out. Like I said, we haven't even met in person yet, but I'm looking forward
I
to
know.
when things clear up. We can get together, man, and laugh and so forth, and talk about some of the stuff over drinks. But real pleasure,
Yeah,
brother. I will. I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you at some point soon. But definitely want to thank you for coming out.
yeah. Thanks. Sounds great.
All right, man. Take care, Tom.
All right. Take care. Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
So, all right. So, Carlos, is anyone what's next here? Are we gonna take a minor little break here, and then you want to go into just our wrap up phase? I would like to bring some people out. Is like a thing happening right now for? Can you hear me, Carlos?
I'm here.
Anybody hear me?
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna say, so do you want to do like a final little wrap up here with everybody? I mean, I assume there's a lot of questions people want to ask and so forth. Or any of
Yeah.
them other chat for the pitch session or one forth, or is that not happening?
The pitch session should have already concluded with
Okay.
my manga. Yeah, we started that about an hour ago. So at this point, we're pretty much done. That was all of our panelists. That was all of our guests. Just basically the wrap up, and we're done for the night, Fred.
All right. Well, then let me get ready and do that real quickly. Then I'm gonna probably just do a quick. I'll just reshare the stuff that we shared the other day because people really like those videos.
Sure.
Uh, and then answer any questions and log out. So we'll give it another. So we got 6:16. I'll take it to 6:30 or maybe a little after. But otherwise, no, we're done. Certainly before 7 o'clock. That's for damn sure. So let me go on and get ready and do that right now. We'll answer any of your questions. So if you want to turn me on, am I on the screen now? I guess I don't know.